Then there are spirits that are the names of which are names of animals. Those are probably either powers or rulers. And it doesn't really matter to me exactly what level they're on, but to me, those are not foot soldiers. And then there are the mythological animals or monsters. Those are probably ruler spirits. That's where Leviathan is, and other strong spirits that torment people quite a bit. You hardly ever hear any of them addressed, except some people are aware of Leviathan as a spirit and not just a strange verse in the Bible. You know, yes, there are some people who know Leviathan. Eckhart had something to do with that. John Eckhart, in his book Demon Hit List, it's 96 pages of nothing but demon names, and that was the first person that I ever heard of that named spirits on higher levels, some of which have names that start with capital letters.
Hi.
Hi.
You think it's possible it might have tripped the breaker switch? It might have tripped the breaker switch?
I don't know.
I mean, if it pulls on it like that.
Well, just turn on the water in here and see if everything's
I
cool.
don't think it's on.
It's not. It could have blown a circuit. So keep going.
And so in Eckhart's book, he names a lot of foot soldier spirits, but he also, that's the first person that I ever saw naming spirits that have capital letters at the beginning of their name. Leviathan being one, Chemosh being one. Leviathan is probably a ruler spirit. I don't think it was ever worshipped as a god, but Chemosh was a god of the Moabites or Canaanites. So that's a false god level. That's not foot soldier level in my way of thinking. And he named a few others, like Apollyon. That was a Greek or Roman god. So he names a few gods. And it isn't necessarily, he doesn't really call them gods, he just calls them spirits.
Yeah.
Which that's what he's talking about. He's talking about these spirits that name themselves after the beings that people thought were gods. Okay? So then the Lord began to lead me. The first person that suggested it to me was actually Mr. Shepherd. To learning about all the Greek false gods and goddesses and all the gods of different cultures, because he said those would all be demons. And I thought about it and I said, yeah, you're right. So that's when I began to gather a lot of information about so many false god spirits, gods and goddesses. Colin did a search on the computer and came up with 11 pages, double-spaced type, or may have been space and a half, 11 pages of, they call them gods, fertility gods, love gods, what else do they call them? Love and fertility. What they are is sex demons, okay? The mythology, the teaching about what that was about is one, the legend is one thing, but the spirits by those names and all those things in those legends are names of spirits. The spirits by those names aren't about love, they're about sex. They're about sexual perversion. So in other words, I have a list of 11-page list full of names of sexual spirits, high-level sexual spirits on the false god level. So that's just an example of how numerous that is, and they're not, in my way of thinking, they're not foot soldiers. Now maybe some people, when they say foot soldiers, they're referring to just anything that's down here on earth level. But, you know, there are definitely levels of strength and levels of versatility and levels of power, even among the spirits that are typically in people. Many of the people who address spirits never address spirits on the false god level. And rarely do I hear anybody address spirits, the names of which are monsters or animals, except Leviathan has become fairly well known, and so has Python. Jezebel is another example of a spirit that's probably a ruler spirit. Um, she was not a god, but that's a strong. Jezebel is a strong spirit and very versatile. And to me, Jezebel's not a foot soldier. But
Well, that's what.
now Jezebel can be like a principality,
Yeah.
but it's also it has lower levels, and those levels are in people. So a lot of spirits actually can be what there's a level of it in the second heaven, and there are levels of it that are down here and in people. And it's not all that clear cut. Well, like if Jezebel is a principality, that means it's not in people. It's not like that. There's Jezebel that's in people. There's Jezebel in the second heaven. And Jezebel and Ahab and Antichrist spirit work together a lot. But as soon as I say that, then I think, well, yeah, but there are other combinations that work with Jezebel. So, people try to say, well, these three spirits work together. And whenever you find one, you always find the others. But it's not that rigid. It's not that fixed. Demons get together in various combinations, depending on whatever they're trying to do at the moment.
I'm trying to remember the name of the woman that is part of Charisma magazine, but she's no longer there. She's in Florida. She's written a book about various aspects of this. But last summer, there was a word on the Elijah list about the operation of Leviathan working with Jezebel to divide churches, to break apart families. So there was no doubt in my mind that that was a higher level.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So,
yes.
Very interesting. Anyhow,
so whatever level and whatever people call them, people need their demons cast out. And doing more in the heavenlies, there's definitely a place for it. There's value for it. But no matter how much of that is done, people still need their demons cast out.
Well, I think that, like in the case of Jason, and where I launched was to go into the courtroom of heaven and break the accuser of the brethren that was causing authorities to come after him because he had voted twice. He had not realized that he had because of a physical condition or whatever, and things opened up in a hard way for him after he was filmed at a Trump rally. So that whole thing, I didn't know it was still going on, and he was still being persecuted, and he was still being followed, and he didn't have the legal means to fight the Justice Department, which has been so corrupted. But now that Bill Barr and what they're turning around and discovering, and the false dossier, all of the things that are happening here, it is amazing. Maria Bartoloma on her program this morning had Devin Nunes, who's done incredible research. He's the congressman, and they are starting to see the corruption at the level that it's been at. It's never been anything like this in our nation's history, and it's about to be broken and exposed. Probably Jim Comey will be indicted. It's very possible that Hillary Clinton will be as well. All of these things are going to happen, and Rick Joyner believes as it's beginning to happen, a civil war, again, he was told by the Lord in a dream, will break out where neighbor will be firing against neighbor with physical bullets and all of the above. But it is because right before the first Great Awakening with Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield, they couldn't really prevent the signing of the Declaration of the Independence and the writing of the Constitution, where they called a black man two-thirds of a because of slavery, two-thirds of a human. So that curse went into our Constitution. It was amended But then during the Second Great Awakening with Charles Finney and Daniel Nash, they weren't really able to prevent the real Civil War from breaking out, but they did reach Lincoln. He did, write the Emancipation Proclamation, and but it wasn't completed the way the Lord wanted for this nation. And this Third Great Awakening and a coming Civil War will take place. But if we pray as watchmen on the wall and continue to do what we're doing, it will be completed after that's all over with, and this nation will have the blessing that he intended from its foundation back in the 1600s. The Lord. That vision was given, and Sid Roth interviewed Rick Joyner about this, and that's where I heard this, and I began to go, there's some truth to that. It's gonna take place, but we will pray through that. We will see here, the gold that's discovered in these mountains. We will see the prosperity, the oil released, and this will be a safe haven. There's a guy down the street that is practicing with his AK-47. I heard it one Saturday. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. I mean, it's like, holy smokes. These semi-automatics are really quite freaky. And that's taking place too.
Okay,
Along with everything that you're doing in your ministry.
Concerning the vision of Rick Joyner, and that's the first time I heard that, and corruption and Civil War and stuff. One thing that I'd like to say about that is we have much worse things now than a statement in the writings that you were talking about. Yes, that is very regrettable that at that time people didn't think of black people as, fully human. But we have so much hideous corruption among government people, politicians,
Planned Parenthood.
that has to be addressed, and even
Margaret
worse than
Sanger. Margaret Sanger.
So, I just, I don't know exactly how God's going to deal with all that stuff, but we have very hideous, horrible things being done by many of our politicians because they're sold out to achieving success or keeping success as politicians by way of doing what the Satanists basically want them to do. And a lot of it is they're kind of blackmailed into it because when they are first elected and come or appointed and come to the welcoming parties in Washington, D.C., they are provided with sex slaves, basically underage, and whatever they participate in is used to basically blackmail them in terms of, if you do not vote the way we want you to vote, if you do not administer your agency the way we want you to administer it, we will expose what you did at this party to the public. And so, and that's just, like a little part of what I'm talking about. The government has, at least I've been told, I don't have time to go check all this out personally, government officials, I won't say the government, but government officials, and this was great deal of this was in place before Trump was ever elected, so I'm not saying this is about Trump.
Oh, I know.
But this stuff has been going on for several administrations prior to this one.
Well, go back to
and they have houses full of underage sex slaves that they bring in just, whenever for their various events. And they've even become adept at somehow identifying people that are immune to venereal disease, and those are the clean ones that they love to use the most. And very hideous things are being done. So these things, of course, are extremely offensive to God. And like I said, I don't know exactly how God is going to deal with it, but it's no small matter, and it's nothing he's going to just ignore indefinitely.
Well, also, many of it, the way that Washington was laid out by the Masons,
Yes.
now you have the big curse. Now everything's been corrupted. I believe all of it's going to be broken, including the spilling of innocent blood, where there's now genocide being suggested by the corruption of the Democratic Party. So all of this is
Yes,
happening,
yes.
and we are fighting this fight as watchmen on the wall. And that's where I believe the sound, that crazy sound that I release, comes in. With teaching people how to do that with their own personal shofar. Everybody has one.
All right. I would like to say some things about that, but I would like to not be recorded.
Okay, we're off record now. Have a nice day.